Morning, everybody. I have a very exciting guest here today, Chris Orlob. Chris, welcome to our podcast.
Sugata, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. We've been a huge fan of you. We've been following you on LinkedIn. I know we've gone back and forth. Our entire sales team are subscriber to your, training series. We love it. We closed $1 million deal last quarter following your tricks. Yay to the sales team, but thank you for teaching us all those tricks. So I'm super excited.
I mean, that seems like a pretty good ROI, $1 million deal. Do I get a cut of that?
We need to discuss that offline. Certainly. We can discuss. But no, thank you. And your whole approach to this has been so refreshing. Many of us who came from enterprise sales, we read challenger sales and read those, different things, but you make it very pragmatic and real. So what I was hoping to do today is to really talk to you about at a macro level, where things are going. You see a lot in the funding space. SaaS has been up and down over the last 18 months or so. Things kind of coming back. So we'd love to see, how you see that play out. But before we get going, I'd love to have you introduce you to our audience.
Sure. Yeah. So my name's Chris Orlob. Probably the thing I'm best known for these days is helping grow a little company called Gong from when I joined, a little under $200,000 in annual revenue. The logo looked like clip art at the time. Actually, for those watching on video, I have my old Gong backpack. This is what the logo looked like when I joined the company, right? Like somebody's 7-year-old daughter must have made that. And, 5.5 years later, we had successfully grown the company to over 200 million in annual revenue. They're doing even better than that today. That's when I left the company, and I played a few roles there, one of which was sales leader. And now I am about 2 years into running a passion project of mine, which is called PClub. And PClub is an online education and skill transformation platform for SaaS revenue teams, where we find these amazing course authors to create, skills courses to help people close more deals and sell more. And we have a hell of a lot of fun doing it.
Awesome. So you see a lot. I know you work with a lot of companies. You work with investors, private equity, and VCs, and etc. So, last couple of weeks, the market has been up and down. People are guessing where things are going. Salespeople must be wondering, how is this quarter going to turn out? How is Q4 going to turn out? So instead of talking about specifically, certain sectors, stepping back a little bit, can you give us your thoughts, like where things have been, where things are roughly right now from a SaaS sales perspective?
Yeah, I've got a couple of thoughts on that. So one is I recently talked with the chief revenue officer of a pretty decently successful SaaS company, right? My guess is they probably do around 150 million in annual revenue or something like that. And he said, we have gone from a demand positive selling environment to a demand neutral selling environment, and in some cases, a demand negative selling environment. And those three buckets changed how I think, right? Demand positive, demand neutral, demand negative. And one of the points that he made is your playbooks, your skills, your go-to-market approaches need to change based on which bucket of those your company, falls into at this given moment, right? Because I'll just use skills as an example. If you were in a demand positive environment in like 2021, early 2022, people were buying just about anything in the name of productivity. And now they're not, right? Now it actually takes salespersonship. Now you have to create demand instead of just fulfill demand. Very different skill set. And I think what we've seen is a very big gap when it comes to demand creation selling abilities over the last couple of years. And so that's one of the things I would share, right? That's very, brass tacks, how the macro economy affects sellers and go-to-market practitioners. The other thing I've noticed is we've actually been in this demand negative or demand neutral environment for about 2 years now, right? Depending on which sector you sell into, but it's starting to ripple in a way that it hadn't 2 years ago. So 2 years ago when this started, right, Ukraine got invaded by Russia. That was one of the kind of triggering moments for the economy starting to slide. The biggest sector that was affected was technology, and technology selling to other technology, right? That's where most of the pain in the economy came from. And that's how it had been for the tail end of 2022 and for all of 2023. Companies that sold to non-technology were generally in a better spot in 2023, right? If you sold to K through 12 or the government or just non-tech industries, you were probably insulated from that a little bit. Now it's starting to ripple, though. Now I'm starting to hear a lot of companies who sell to non-tech start to be affected, right? We're in 2024 at the time of this recording. And when I talked to some of those same chief sales officers a year ago, they were doing pretty well. And now they're just starting to see the demand negative signals crop up in their business that I had seen crop up in tech selling to tech a year ago. So those are a couple things and just pieces of food for thought I would give everybody listening as far as world according to Chris, how I see the economy right now.
Got it. So let's kind of maybe split by a couple of segments. One is by mid-market and one is enterprise. So deals, 20, 30, 40, 50K in mid-market, couple of decision makers involved. You still have to go through approval process. So let's take that, and then we'll talk about enterprise, buying through a committee, buying through IT, et cetera, right? So can you tell us a little bit, if I am a salesperson selling 20, 30, 50K deals in a mid-market, demand neutral environment, what are the things I need to think about and approach differently next 3 to 6 months horizon?
Well, I think the skill set for both of those segments has gone up a level, right? So the mid-market rep now needs an enterprise skill set, and the enterprise rep now needs a strategic skill set. And so even if you're selling $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 mid-market deals, probably what you're feeling is there's more complexity in the purchase process than you've ever felt. Decisions are getting made at a higher level and with far more scrutiny, sometimes at the board level with some of these mid-market companies. CFOs involved, whether you talk to him or her or not. Buying committees are getting bigger and more risk averse and prone to doing nothing. Now, even for a $30,000, $50,000 deal, which means you've got to work harder and you've got to have more of a selling skill set. What does that look like in reality? Well, one is a more sophisticated version of discovery, right? You can't uncover nice to solve pain and think you're going to close a deal because you think of the reality of an executive that you're selling to. If you're talking about something nice to solve, they might seem like they're interested in solving that in the moment. And then they get off Zoom with you or Teams or whatever you're using. And their Slack messages are lit up like a Christmas tree. And they've got hundreds of emails. And they're on back-to-back Zoom meetings from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And they've already forgotten about you if you're selling a nice to solve. And they're going to go dark on you and they're not going to prioritize this. Because remember, executives are not usually, this is not always the case, but they're not usually cash poor when it comes to buying stuff. They're time and attention poor. And so if you're not anchoring to a very high priority, which you can do through more sophisticated discovery, you're probably going to lose that deal. You're probably not even going to lose it. It's just never going to get going. So that's one. You've got to get far better at multithreading and building consensus, right? Decisions are buying committees are getting bigger, more risk averse. That correlates with a skill, multithreading and building consensus. That's not easy to do, especially for people who closed $50,000 single threaded 2 years ago because everybody had budget and they didn't have to go to their boss. So that's another one. Another, I probably should have led with this one, but business cases are the new black in sales, right? So if you can't construct a sophisticated business case for your champion to go sell internally and co-author something with them, then you're probably going to struggle because that is the situation your champion is facing, right? They're getting into, I just got off the call with a chief revenue officer a few minutes ago before this meeting, and I had to prep him for a $60,000 deal. That's not a huge deal, not a small deal, but not a huge deal. I had to prep him to sell during his offsite with his executive leadership team in San Luis Obispo. He was meeting with them and he had to give a whole presentation on why it was worth spending $60,000. Right? A few years ago, he didn't have to do that. He could have just spent 60 grand. CFO doesn't know about it, doesn't care. A little bit different today. So those are some of the tactical skills people need to start getting a little bit better at, especially individual sellers when it comes to getting deals done in this environment.
All right, so let's go back to this whole multi-thread. I kind of see you as the father of multi-thread discussion, right? That you kind of started a few years ago, and a lot of people are embracing it and trying to figure out. So let's talk a 50K, 60K deal. A point of contact has come in as a project owner, very excited, wants to put automation in place. Me, the sales guy, super excited, did a great discovery, pain points fit right in, and I send the pricing. It's like, yeah, next week I'm going to come back. And then it goes dark on me, right? So how do I don't know. I have no other contacts. I don't know who to, of course I can look up LinkedIn. How do I multi-thread, Chris, in that environment?
Well, I think you need to, it requires a dose of emotional intelligence and social intelligence, because if you're having a conversation with somebody mid-level and you point blank say something like, so who's your boss? Or who's actually going to approve this, right? You're going to alienate that person. You're going to piss them off and they're not going to want to work with you. But you can do more nuanced, finessed versions of that question, right? As you're having a discovery conversation with them and you ask a conversation like, who else is impacted by this challenge and how are they impacted? You're not asking for access to those people, so it's not an intrusive question, but you're starting to get visibility into what that buying committee is going to look like. Right. And so that's one very simple way. Another way is like once they start to reveal that, right, they say something like, oh, my chief sales officer, he or she is super impacted by this. In fact, they're the ones, that put me on the path to go exploring your solution. Then you can just naturally ask something like, okay, if we ever get a conversation with him or her, what do they care about the most, right? What's going on in their world that drove them to assign you to come talk to me in the first place? And so it's not rocket science, right? You're still asking the same fundamental question of like, who's the decision maker? Who cares about this? But you're doing it in a more nuanced way, right? That's where emotional intelligence comes in. Because again, if I go, who's your boss? Who's the decision maker? Who actually makes this decision? That question is void of any emotional intelligence. But if you ask the same fundamental question in a way that lends itself to them wanting to answer, right? Who else is impacted by the challenge you're sharing with me? How are they impacted by that challenge? If they've gone on for 5 minutes getting blue in the face about how somebody else is impacted by a challenge, it becomes very easy for you to then ask for an introduction to that person, because it would be inconsistent of them to say, no, it doesn't make sense for them to talk to you, because they just spent 5 minutes selling you on how impacted they are. Right? There's this psychological principle that Robert Cialdini pioneered in his book, Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion. The principle of commitment and consistency is one of those. And basically what that principle means is if you can get somebody to commit to something small, they're likely to commit to something within the same thing at a larger scale. Right? So the example he uses in his book is he said, there was a study where people would point blank walk up to people and say, are you willing to donate $100 to, some political cause? And they had a very low hit rate on that. But then they tried something else. They went to, another group of people and said, hey, are you willing to wear this pin in support of this political cause? And most people said yes. And then the next day, they went to those same people who were wearing the pin and said, are you willing to donate $100 to this political cause? And I don't know what the numbers were, but they had a very high hit rate, right? Because they're getting people to commit to something small before they ask for a bigger commitment. And so that works the same way in multi-threading. If I can get you to commit to something small and say, well, tell me about how your CXO is impacted by this, that's the equivalent of me asking for them to wear this political pin. And then they start to talk and sell me how their CXO is impacted. And then when I make the ask and say, does it feel fair to get him or her involved, given how impacted they are by the challenge, now it's very easy for them to say yes to that.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. So let's move to the other segment, the higher end of the segment, enterprise sales. You said the enterprise sales now need to step up and be a lot more strategic. Can you tell us a little bit about how is that changing in this sort of demand neutral, demand negative environment as we move forward?
I don't know if my answers are wildly different than what's demanded of the mid-market rep. Right? They still need to get better at business cases. What I will say is they probably need to go wider with their discovery efforts. Right? You could close $150,000, $300,000 deals a couple of years ago by having like one discovery call with your champion. And what I have seen the best enterprise reps do to sell in this environment is they'll do a full-blown round of discovery with multiple people in the organization before they ever get into a meeting with power. And now when they're in the meeting with power, the person who can sign a $300,000 check or $1 million check, they're starting that meeting with ultimate credibility, because they start, instead of saying what's keeping you up at night or something like that, they go, Mr. or Mrs. CXO, here's what I've done so far. I've talked to 6 of your direct reports. Here are the people I've talked to, and I've had deep conversations with all of them. And I wanted to start this meeting with a single slide summarizing everything I've learned about your organization. And then I want to get your perspective on that. If you start a meeting with a CXO saying that, instant credibility, right? Because most sellers walk in and they haven't really done their homework, or maybe they've had one discovery call with some other person and the CXO doesn't want to really be there. They took the meeting reluctantly. They can't wait for it to be over. But you walk in and you do something like that, you are in a different plane of existence from other salespeople, if you can pull that off.
So what I'm hearing from you, this is actually a little bit good news for salespeople, because lately they've been all hearing all these AI bots are coming, they're going to replace my jobs. And what you're telling me is that I really got to move up the chain and build skills. And so talk to a little bit about this rapid change that's happening in the tech stack. If I'm a salesperson, how can I leverage AI to help this journey where I need to spend more time, more discovery, more multi-thread, and I have the same amount of time, and right? So how can I be more efficient? What do you see is happening in that space?
Yeah, I got a couple of things to say there. First, like how you use these things and whether you use them. I don't think I'm going to have any mind-blowing insights there, right? It's like you should use ChatGPT. You should use these tools because they're going to make you more efficient so that you can spend your time more effectively, right? The way I like to think about this is if you are a revenue-generating professional, a salesperson, a marketer, a sales leader, an entrepreneur, a CEO, one of the most useful paradigms for you to buy into is the fact that all of your tasks can be categorized into tasks that generate $10,000 an hour, $1,000 an hour, $100 an hour, $10 an hour, right? So even if you're an individual contributor, yes, there are things you do that are worth $10,000 an hour. The problem is you do them so infrequently and almost by accident, and you don't have enough time to do all of them because you're doing a bunch of $10 an hour or $100 an hour tasks. And so things like AI and these technology tools, they allow you to delegate the trivial things, the $100 an hour tasks, the $10 an hour tasks, so that you can invest more of your time on tasks that throw off $10,000 an hour in revenue or income. Right. So that's the idea there. As far as how you use all those things, I'll leave that to other experts. The other thing that I would mention about like this kind of this relentless march of AI encroaching on the sales and go-to-market world is I think we're going to see a huge skills gap and separation between really great salespeople and mediocre, low-skilled ones. We already see a separation like that today. That problem is as old as the sales profession, and I predict it's going to get bigger. Now, one of the reasons for that is if you think about what kind of sales jobs are going to be eliminated by AI, which ones are they going to be? They're going to be the low-skilled ones. They're going to be the entry-level ones. They're going to be the inbound SDR jobs. Now, when you start to cut the bottom of the sales profession, those roles, those jobs, they used to serve as incubation functions for salespeople, right? You could, entry-level college grads, they could get into these, inbound SDR roles. They could start to, get their chops going a little bit, and they could graduate to the next role and then the next role. And so they were going through this skill progression. Now, what's going to happen is if we chop out the bottom, these entry-level sales roles, then college grads and entry-level sellers are now going into a role that they are not prepared for. They're going straight into like a mid-market role or an account executive role because, the entry-level roles are now being done by technology, and they're not going to know what the hell to do. And so I predict that AI, while it's going to introduce a lot of efficiency for business, and I'm not like an anti-AI guy by any means, but I'm also calling this prediction. I think we're going to see a larger skills gap because there are going to be less opportunities for salespeople to incubate their skills before they graduate onto new roles that demand bigger skills. They're going to be thrown immediately into roles that demand skills that they are probably not going to be very well prepared for.
Okay, that's a lot. So let me kind of unpack a couple of things from there. It's quite amazing. It's love talking to you. So one is this whole notion of growth mindset, right? I'm at $1,000 table. I want to move up to a 10,000, then 100,000, and $1 million table. I got to play different games. I actually need to learn counting cards almost, right? So we'll come back to that growth mindset, but let's talk a little bit about process. Do you see, as technology gets more and more infused, how we sell, how we buy has changed, right? Because I do all my research online. I go to peer groups online. So buyer behavior has already changed substantially, right? Analysts have less role to play versus peer review sites have a larger role to play. So that is changing. But if I come to the sales side, if you think about, let's say, next 18 months, in mid-market and enterprise, do you see processes changing rapidly, or they are just getting more efficient using these tools?
I think processes are going to change. I don't know if I have a clear prediction on exactly how they're going to change, but that's nothing new, right? What we're going to go into is going to be a new way to sell and go to market, but that's always been the case, right? Every 3 to 5 years, some sort of new change in the either market conditions or way people buy or selling environment is introduced in a way that changes how go-to-market teams and sellers and professionals have to adapt to. And this is just another one of those examples, right? The skills that made you successful 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago are different than the skills that make you successful today. Now, that's a little bit of an exaggeration. There are some level of timeless go-to-market skills, right? Solving problems and uncovering problems, that's going to be timeless. But an example is signal-based selling, right? That's kind of like the new wave, the new trend for prospecting. If I would have said the word signal-based selling on a podcast 3 years ago, people would have been dumbfounded. They wouldn't know what I'm talking about. And not that everybody knows what I'm talking about now, but most people know but a lot of people know what I'm talking about when I talk about signal-based selling, right? It is using digital signals and technology tools to find the 3% of buyers in your TAM that are actively in buying conversations, that are actively in the market and getting the low-hanging fruit without you having to wait for them to come to you. So I don't have more specificity than that. Like, how are the processes going to change? I don't really know. Are the processes going to change? Yes, I think they're definitely going to change.
That makes a lot of sense. So let's go back to the first point that you made about growth mindset. So what are the key attributes you see people are sort of, the Olympics is going on, right? People, are winning in fractions of seconds, and the excellence you see, the ones we win in a fraction, the amount of hours and efforts and practice and everything they put in. Sales is possibly, in today's environment, right? You have to be an Olympian. You have to compete that way. So if you're advising to someone who's coming into the field or being here and kind of trying to re-up their skill sets, attitude-wise, mindset-wise, what do you think 2 or 3 things that they keep in the forefront in this new age that's coming, new tech that's coming? The hurdles are higher, as you're saying. How do they play? What do they tell themselves every day that they wake up, that this is a new game? How do they motivate themselves?
Well, I think you're not going to find a great salesperson who's not a student. I think you're not going to find a great marketer who's not a student. Now, will you find a great salesperson who succeeds for a short period of time who's not a student? Yes, those people exist everywhere. but 7 years later, they might be selling cars or something like that. You're not going to find enduring success from somebody who's not a great student. Now, some of the implications behind that are the foundational mindset things. It is understanding. I actually can't believe that there is still a conversation about, are salespeople naturally born or are they made? Now, sure, you can make an argument that like you do need some sort of like intrinsic personality traits to be successful in sales. But I don't know about you. I've never seen a baby pop out of the womb who knows how to multithread or negotiate or access. These are specific skills that you can learn.
Right.
You can edit that part out if you want. But especially if you're selling like complex B2B deals, right? Selling, I actually don't consider it a skill by itself. I consider it a collection of many skills that lead to an outcome, which is a sale or a deal or revenue, right? So I'm kind of getting on a tangent here. There's this guy named Tim Ferriss, who I'm assuming most people listening probably know who that is. Wrote the book, The 4-Hour Workweek, 4-Hour Body, 4-Hour Chef. And he has this podcast where he interviews top performers from all walks of life, Olympians, business people, scientists, chefs, that kind of thing. And about 10 years ago, he had this podcast he did. He wasn't interviewing anybody. This was like a solo one where he talked about rapid skill acquisition. And the way he described it is the best way to master something very quickly is to break the skill down into its component parts. And the example he used was basketball. Basketball is not a skill. Basketball is a collection of skills. It's dribbling with your left hand. It's dribbling with your right hand. It's shooting free throws. It's three-pointers. It's layups. It's dunking. It's rebounds. It's passing. And if you want to get really good at basketball, then you deconstruct all those into their pieces, you prioritize them, and then you get good at one of those component skills after another. And lo and behold, after 3 to 5 years of doing that, you're going to be an NBA level player. Sales works the same way. Selling's not a skill. Discovery is a skill. Quantifying pain's a skill. Business cases are a skill. Cold emailing's a skill. Cold calling's a skill. Multi-threading's a skill. Negotiating's a skill, etc. And that's the same way you get very, very good at selling, is identifying these component skills, mastering them one after the other. And lo and behold, you do that for 2, 3, 5 years, and you wake up to a completely different life.
So let's go to maybe, I'm going to plug a little bit of Chris Orlob in. It's not that you need any plugging, but we're a big fan of your courses, right? And we've been using it for the last couple of years. I just don't want my competition to go there. Everybody else can sign up. But tell us, our audience, a little bit, the courseware that you put together. I know it's your passion. You're constantly sharing on LinkedIn, a lot of the learnings that you're working with execs and sales VPs that you're seeing. It's all current and fresh. How is it constructed? What are the different levels there? Melissa, our sales head, has been talking and working with you. She's a great fan, and I see absolutely tangible benefit that the sales team has got. How is that structured, Chris? What's in it there? If I'm kind of going in there, what can I expect to get out of it?
Well, let me start with the philosophy behind it. I always tell people you're not years away from anything you want in life. You're skills away from anything you want in life. And so if you think about where you are and where you want to be in life, most people measure the distance between those two things in time, years, decades. And I always tell people that time is the wrong measurement. The measure between where you are and where you want to be is skills, right? Identify where you are versus where you want to be. Identify the skills you need to get there, and you will succeed in collapsing the time it takes. And so I always tell people you can have anything you want in life if you just build the skills that those dreams demand. And that life philosophy was baked into me at a very early age. And that's why I ended up starting PClub, because it combines these two passions of sales and go-to-market and learning and skill acquisition. So the way PClub works and the way we organize our courses is we create separate curriculum for every specific role in selling, right? So an SMB account executive is going to go through a different course path than an enterprise account executive because those are different skill sets. And we have a single course for every component skill, just like I was describing a few minutes ago. There's nothing comprehensive in one single course, because that's a mile wide and an inch deep, and we'd rather help you master one skill at a time. And so that's kind of how we structure the curriculum. Now, the second part of that is who teaches it. I know salespeople well, and they don't want to talk to a career trainer who's never closed a deal. They don't want to talk to a guy who closed Xerox deals 30 years ago in a completely different selling environment. And so what makes PClub very unique is we go find these amazing course authors who have two things in common. One, they are a proven practitioner with a proven track record in the skill that they're teaching. And two, they know how to teach it. That's a very rare individual, and we turn away about 99 people for every one person who actually succeeds in making a course with us. We vet their backgrounds, we do all of that. And so if you're an individual seller and you join PClub, you get to learn from the best of the best. You get to go very deep on these skills. And we have some amazing success stories of sellers who have broken ARR records in their company and made President's Club and made gobs and gobs of money. And we also work with businesses to create programs and operationalize these skills within their organization. So that's enough of a PClub commercial for now, but that's the underlying philosophy, is this idea that you're not years away from everything you want in life. You're skills away. And we provide one of many ways for you to act on that philosophy.
And I think the best part we love is that how fresh it is. I think you're constantly updating content and it's relevant. And as I've seen, especially in our sales team, there have been huge benefit. So speaking of the word P, the ultimate P word that, especially as a C-level leader, I worry about is pricing discount. And I know you have a lot of content on that, how to sell on value, not to sell on price, because your point is if you're competing on price, chances are somebody's going to go lower. So I know it's kind of a little bit orthogonal to our main frame of discussion, but in this demand neutral environment, any performer, the temptation is to cut price. Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit your philosophy if you look into the next 6 months. How do you get into this complex buying environment where you have to do a better discovery, you have to multi-thread, you have to make a business case, you have to be patient essentially and help your sponsor to be successful, to make that pitch to its executive team, but not succumb to the discussion, are you the cheapest solution? What's the best way to frame it?
Well, there's two ways to think about it. There are things you do before you ever get to the negotiation table to defend value and defend price. So like the way you work your sales cycle. And then there's negotiation skills. And so I'll talk about the first one for a second. Speaking of fresh content, I have a new course that I'm releasing right now called Advanced Negotiation Masterclass. And in that course, we talk about how to create undeniable defensibility. Okay, undeniable defensibility. And what that means is there are 5 things you can do throughout a sales cycle that when you finally get to the negotiation table, it makes negotiating really easy. And the 5 criteria of undeniable defensibility are: number 1, quantified value. Okay, so if you can quantify the business impact of your customer's problem, they're automatically going to become less price sensitive. But that's only one of 5 things. Because if all you do is quantify value, you're still exposed to competition. Because they might go, I agree with your business case, but I think I can get the same value from your competitor who is quoting 50% of your price. So the second component of undeniable defensibility is differentiation, right? So if you can establish quantified value, and then you can establish differentiation that your buyer actually values, now you're 40% of the way there. You're 2 out of 5 pieces of undeniable defensibility. The third component of undeniable defensibility is a powerful, motivated champion. Okay, so an example is I was going through a tough negotiation with procurement for a big deal we closed about 4 or 5 months ago, and the VP of Enterprise Sales desperately wanted PClub. And I eventually got him to exercise his political capital to, and this is not a nice way to say it, steamroll his procurement team into paying the price that I was asking for. Okay, so if you have those 3 things, now you're in a really good spot, right? You've quantified value, you've differentiated, you've found a motivated, politically powerful champion. The fourth component is a multi-threaded network, right? Because if you have a powerful, motivated champion, but you're single-threaded, and that person gets fired or goes dark on you or whatever, and you have nobody else to reach out to, now you're screwed. Doesn't matter if you had a powerful, motivated champion. And I know that I said there were 5, but I'm struggling to remember what the 5th one is. So maybe we'll just have to keep it to 4, and we'll use that as a little bit of a teaser. But if you do those, at least those 4 things, and you walk into a negotiation becomes pretty easy at that point. Now, it still takes some skill. You've still got to know how to negotiate and use some of that finesse. But there are ways to structure your deals before you ever get to the negotiation table that put you in a position of power and strength and the ability to deliver a win-win scenario for both parties.
That's awesome. So last point I wanted to chat a little bit with you. I know you did spend some of your career in this domain, is selling indirect, working with partners. We don't have a lot of time. Maybe it's a follow-on session, but share a little bit, Chris, your thoughts on in a co-selling environment. The brands that buy our product, they basically automate indirect selling, right? They onboard their partners, their resellers, they enable them, they co-market, co-sell. So if I'm a channel sales professional and, I learned from your courseware how to sell better direct, and I now want to be a coach. So this is 5th level of leadership now, right? So you're kind of creating mini, Orlobs. What are the key attributes I need to have?
That's enough of me. We don't need more of
there you
one.
Go. There you go. There you go. But a mini coach. So as what are the attributes you have that makes you a good sales coach? That as a channel sales professional, I need to be to my channel partner who is now selling direct. Like, what are the attributes make you successful?
Well, I think what a lot of people get wrong is they view the relationship with the channel as one of, I'm here to train you to sell and only to train you to sell. And what they forget is channel people, the channel, they have a lot of options, right? You're not the only thing that they're trying to sell. They're probably selling multiple things. And so if all you're doing is training them, they might smile and nod and agree, but go prioritize something else. And so you have to remember that like a huge part of your job is to sell the channel on why they should sell you, right? So I'm sure some people see me as coming across as like some overly aggressive salesperson when I say things like you should always be selling. Now, what I'm not saying when I say that is you should always be trying to close somebody and collect money from somebody. What I am saying is you will influence people in the way you want them if you are always selling. So if you go watch like some of our top rated PClub courses, what you are going to notice is the course author is selling the student on the course, the entire course. Yes, they're teaching through it, but if they're not constantly agitating the pain that the course solves for and explaining the benefits of the things that they just learned and telling success stories throughout, you've lost them. You can't just teach. You have to sell and teach at the same time. And the same thing is applicable to channel. If you just show up and you train and it's like a boring training session to show them how to sell your product or whatever the case is, they're going to forget about you. And so, I know we're not getting super tactical on that, but I think some people lose sight of that and forget that you're not selling in a vacuum when it comes to dealing with the channel. They have a lot of options. They have a lot of people vying for their attention. And so you do have to play this proactive, I'm here to sell and resell you on why you should be prioritizing us.
Okay, that may be our next topic. We'll set up another conversation on this because there's a huge opportunity because, as you know, 70% of sales happen through indirect at a worldwide level. So someone's success is dependent on someone else's success, right? So Chris, as we think forward next 18 months, right, do you see, are we switching from a demand neutral to demand positive environment, or can we kind of stay here? What's the Orlob crystal ball look like?
I think my crystal ball needs to be taken with a very large grain of salt, right? I don't make too many predictions, right? The one I made a few minutes ago is definitely one of them about how there's going to be bigger skill gaps. I don't think I'm very sophisticated when it comes to predicting the economy. I would say I think history is a good indicator of what we can probably expect, where the typical economic cycle is you go through an upswing and then there's a downswing, and that downswing can last anywhere from like 18 to 36 months. And then the economy starts slowly climbing up again. And maybe 7 or 8 years from now, we're going to see another rise, right? So I think over the next 6 to 12 months, we'll start to get out of some of the pain in the economy and we'll start going back up again and things will feel good again. But that's just me predicting based on how typical economic cycles go, and who knows what's actually going to happen. So maybe, 2 years from now, we all go listen to this podcast and go, wow, Chris couldn't have more egg on his face if he tried.
But I think it feels right. Macro-wise, even though the world has a debt problem, but there are enough smart people, I guess, started to look at it. But in general, I guess direction that you're setting, it feels about right. We're kind of hearing from that customer base also. There's a near-term issues, but hopefully we'll work through it. Chris, huge fan. Thank you for being here. We definitely need to do a part 2 on the partner indirect sales. Thank you again, and have a great day.
Thanks for having me.